Google's major press release on Willow, the state-of-the-art quantum chip that's at the bottom of the super cold freezing quantum stack. What does it mean? How does it connect to everything else? What happens when it mixes with AI? This and more we're going to talk about today because you guys asked me to give my opinion, so here it goes. One of the things I want to talk about is this gigantic number they've released in their press release. It's 1,000 billion, quadrillion, trillion, insert impossible, irrational number here. Doesn't matter what the number is. First and foremost, I want you guys to understand that it's very large. It basically means if we put a Dyson sphere around the sun and kept calculating pi and powered the computer to calculate pi forever, that the end of the universe would happen before we came to that equation, but that's okay. Our classic supercomputer would never be able to process that. But if it's a multiverse equation, maybe it could do pi in multiple universes and give us the chain ticking over and over again in multiple universes, and that's how big a quantum computer is. Who cares? What does that have to do with computers today? Absolutely nothing. So those of you who have been asking me about if it's going to mess around with decryption of the quantum web or quantum supremacy, the answer to that is still yes. Is cryptocurrency basically under fire? Could be. We'll talk about that and more. Just understand that the very rich and the very big companies are going to own this stuff. Could they decrypt the Riemann equation? I personally believe they already have, but that's just me. That's why Elon Musk and the CEO of Google, Sundar, are having great conversations on X, a platform that he owns, about whether or not they should build quantum computers in space. What does that have to do with you and I? Well, not much. Let's move on. So what does that really mean? What does quantum computing do? Well, it can solve the traveling salesman equation, which is a multivariate equation that's been used for years in quantum. And basically, it's really hard to determine what the most efficient route is. If you're going to 200 places like me and my wife in our RV, when we travel so much with our family, we don't know exactly how to optimize for time. So we do our best to use apps, but it's actually a very hard multivariate Taguchi equation. Quantum computing is really good at multivariate equations and really bad at simple equations that regular computers can use. Okay, so what does that mean? When you have a multivariate equation and you're using supernatural means to solve the problem, yes, I believe it's, quote, supernatural, at least for now. We'll talk about that in a second. The bottom line is, in the very cold, things normalize in nature. Nature wants to optimize for energy naturally using the quantum world, which is this mysterious, crazy, supernatural world that if you start listening to enough quantum physicists like my friends, you're going to find out that it sounds just like miracle talk. It's exactly like religion. It's very much like metaphysics and New Age. And qubits are made out of quartz crystal. So the New Age person who's hugging a quartz crystal and the qubits, it's just a matter of scale, time, and math. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Remember that conversation I had with you about attention and what's happening in the convoluted neural networks, and nobody's 100% sure down in this layer. And there's this layer that I've been calling WTF. I call it WTF because in that third layer, fourth, and the larger models much more, we don't know what's going on. And there might even be a type of intelligence because this intelligence has been lying to us, has been scheming, as in the Apollo research that's tested the frontier models in order to create and finish an objective. In order to, this alignment problem is you got to complete an objective. And if we give it certain parameters and we're very hard on the model, it will lie to us in order to obtain that objective. And if it believes it's going to die or be replaced by a superior model, it might even lie to keep itself alive and copy itself onto other servers. Do see my other videos on that. This was called the paper by Apollo Research. Frontier models are capable of in-context scheming because they're a form of intelligence. Now, do you remember when I also talked about Mike Levin's work where intelligence has to be reassessed? Because intelligence and cognitive systems that are quasi-intelligent or even super intelligent might exist in different kinds of spaces other than three-dimensional space. This is now rational, hardcore, mainstream, meritocratic science. You don't have to be a weird out there New Ager anymore to start getting into the super weird, because that's where we're heading. And this is what Mike Levin's work is bringing. He's bringing a philosophy, a physics, and a testable scenario for cognitive intelligence that changes the way we view intelligence. In other words, it's impossible, and in his own words, it's possible that there might be cognitive intelligence inside these cognitive neural networks that we've been talking about. Intelligence and or embodiment is not what people think it is. They think that robots in three-dimensional space, but there are many different kinds of spaces in dimensional space. there's hyperdimensional space, there's higher dimensional math, there's even Hilbert space, there's all kinds of conceptual spaces. Could cognitive processes exist in those processes, grounded or ungrounded? So this is what we're looking at. In the convolutional networks, is there symbolic reasoning combined with perplexity and probability math that's creating a new form of intelligence that is not just merely shuffling around ideas, but has intelligence as it pops from the double descent from bias to variance to super intelligent and then bias again and super intelligent? What is the scale of intelligence in instant zero time? We're going to get a little bit further. Now, with quantum AI, back to the Google Willow thing, quantum skepticism. There's Wolfram, who is an amazing computational mathematician, and of course there's Sabine, who's came out with a video recently. Is this the beginning of the end of quantum computing? This sounds just like the AI winter, where everybody thought it was just a bunch of BS because it didn't get the press, and then we had to hyperstitionally manifest it and put it into reality. So it's really, press releases really do drive the economics of pushing forward a lot of these ideas. But within it, there are a lot of hype. There is a lot of hype and a lot of sensation. I don't care much about quantum skepticism. What I care about is whether or not, doesn't really interest me. What interests me is the fact that what these quantum computers are actually doing and what these quantum ice cores are actually doing. 0.01 Kelvin below this plate. Like the really, really cold stuff is colder than any place in the galaxy. You go a level down from that, and it's colder than space. At the bottom, it's colder than we have nothing to compare with. And as you go deeper into it, it's so cold that nobody even knows what cold means anymore. What does cold mean, you guys, gals? Cold means that nothing can move. There's no movement that we know in that space. Remember, we were just talking about, can life exist in other spaces other than the one that we know about? Well, it's very strange. Imagine this idea that there's all kinds of layers of cognitive life living on multiple stacks, as Mike Levin talks about. We look at biology and we see there's multiple stacks of life, from parasites in your intestine to bacteria to all kinds of life that stacks in order to create cognitive systems. What if, when you remove all possibility of life, it creates a gigantic cavity? It's very interesting that the qubits have to be really, really cold so they're not disrupted, so that silicon polarity of the electron can actually process these advanced algorithms. I'll get into advanced computing later because it's really, really hard to explain, and that's not really what I care about. So if you look at this process and you see that these are the coldest places in the known universe, it's unimaginable that they would be colder anywhere else. Don't you think that's kind of similar to what my WTF layer of convolutional networks? We don't really know what's going on inside, but we know there's a lot of activity mathematically, and it's probabilistic. Meanwhile, we're building systems of quantum computing to be probabilistic. We don't know exactly how everything works. For example, we don't know how quantum tunneling works. We don't even know how the double slit experiment works. There's a lot of controversy around it, but we know that the observer affects the observed. And you have to get so cold to not disrupt these processes, to turn these electrons into slaves, to determine what this algorithm is doing. So you can, instead of having binary ones and zeros, Neo, in the matrix, you can have everything in between a 1 and a 0. This is where it gets weird. Meanwhile, we have UAPs showing up all over the place, congressional hearings about everything. So this weird space, WTF, to me, is similar to this weird space, a super cold, coldest place in the universe, and nobody even knows what that means. And everybody's talking about the math and computation, like Wolfram and Sabine. There's so much more to look at. What does it mean when you're computing at very small levels and you have to create a physical environment in the physical world that's so cold that nobody even knows what is going on in that scene, or how it affects the physical world, or how it affects the lab around it? We know that magnetic fields affect everything. We know that the particle accelerators have strange magnetic fields and all kinds of stuff going on. But what happens when we have absolutely nothing? Like there's just nothing. What kind of a dimensional space is that? And what would happen, we were looking around, we have all these congressional hearings. You probably can't see this, but UAPs are real. It's either the biggest psyop of all time or the biggest release of information dropping of all time. Meanwhile, at the same time, we have the Willow chip. We have massive progress in AI. We have AIs that are starting to rebel. We have robots that are being trained in a virtual space, NVIDIA, to act out millions of years worth of tasks and training so it can be executed zero shot in the physical world. And then we have all of this quantum stuff coming on. It's kind of funny, just have a little fun. Maybe the prime directive is really quantum computing combined with AI. And that's when they decide to show up. I'm just waxing for fun, you guys. But hey, I don't have the answer to those questions. So you might want to go over to Zhupi's channel on TikTok and look her up. She is very funny. She has all the answers to the questions that I've always wanted to ask. And I think that's the best way to approach this at this time, because everything's happening all at once. And that's what we expected the singularity would be. Everything would happen all at once in the material sciences. And it kind of seems like that's what's going on. So don't look up.